This is a portable PlayStation 5. It's battery powered, has a built-in screen and sound system, it's got full connectivity, and a fully functioning PS5 all inside one sweet case. But in order to turn this into this, there was so much that needed to be figured out. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you every single step of how this awesome machine was built. And the whole reason I even wanted to make this is because when I was younger, I was lucky enough to have this, a small little portable PlayStation 1. And man, this thing was the coolest thing ever. There's really nothing else like it. It took a system normally you had to just sit in front of your TV and play and made it more mobile. And I absolutely loved it. So, in honor of the old one, it's time to make a new version, except this time out of a PlayStation 5. So, it's time to get this thing open and hope I don't break this. There's no turning back now. And the first step is sadly, we gotta take apart this PS5, break it down to its basic components so we can see what we're working with. After removing all of the screws and instantly voiding my warranty, I can carefully go around and pop out all of the major components that make up the PS5, being as careful as I can not to damage anything. And this is what we're left with: our motherboard, our front I/O and USB ports, our power supply, and our little system cooling fan. It's on to the first challenge, figuring out how we're going to power this on the go. So let's take a closer look at this power supply. And if we look here, we can see that all this really does, it takes power from your wall outlet and turns it into 12 volt DC up to 31 amps. So that tells us we can run our PS5 right off of 12 volts DC, which is honestly super convenient because I think I have the perfect thing that can run this on the go, a 12 volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. But there is a bit of a difference between the PlayStation power supply and this 12 volt battery, because when you test the voltage with the multimeter, we can see we're actually getting a bit more than 12 volts, almost closer to 14. So it turns out this 12 volt battery, it's not actually 12 volts. And if we head over and test the PS5 power supply, we get a clean stable 12 volts. So this actually is 12 volts. I do know that a lot of electronics out there will still run if there's a slight voltage difference, but I don't want to risk it with this PS5. I mean, I'm trying to make a portable PS5, not a portable paperweight. So I need to figure out a way how to get this 12 volt battery to actually be 12 volts. So that's where this comes in, and this is a DC to DC converter. It takes an input range of 9 to 36 volts, and it pushes out 12 volts up to 30 amps, and this should be a super easy way to get a clean 12 volts out of our almost 12 volt battery. So it should be as simple as taking the output and hooking it up to the two pins on the PS5 motherboard. And seeing those exposed pins got me thinking. I have a box full of all types of electrical connectors, including some of these 10 gauge spade connectors, which I think are honestly going to be a perfect fit on the motherboard. And after doing a quick little test fit, it's almost like these were made for it. But before we can plug this into the battery and test this out, it's time to reinstall the fan for proper cooling and also reinstall the USB-C ports on the front I/O. To keep the board off the ground, I got a bunch of these stainless steel standoffs that I go around to all of the holes on the perimeter of the motherboard and attach them with some small little nuts to hold them in place and act like nice little feet. And these will make it easier to install later and also give some nice airflow all around the PS5. Now to test it out, I set up a little test bench with the battery, the DC converter, and a monitor, all running through a small little watt meter so we can see how much power it's drawing. Then I go ahead and plug it into the PS5 and wait for the scariest part of this whole project. Will this thing turn on, or will it be instantly fried? And after what felt like an eternity, the PlayStation logo showed up. We didn't fry our PS5. Nice. Sitting at the main menu, we're pulling right around 70 watts from the battery, and playing Spider-Man, the game that came with our system, we can see that we're pulling right around 190 watts. Now that we know our PS5 still works and that our DC to DC converter is going to run it beautifully, we just solved how we're going to power this thing on the go. Since I'm turning this into a portable PlayStation, we're going to need a case to hold everything, and I landed on this. A super heavy duty yellow case with great clasps and more than enough room on the inside for our PS5 and battery so we can bring this thing wherever we want. But a case filled with a battery and a PS5 isn't going to do us much good without a monitor. So I ended up getting this This is a 17.3 inch monitor, it's 4K resolution, it has some nice ports on the outside, it's powered by USB, full-size HDMI, and 3.5mm output, and it also fits perfectly on the front of this box right here. Nice. In order to install it in our case, we are going to have to make some modifications. So I grabbed myself a piece of poster board and lay the monitor on top and trace around the perimeter of it. Then I can take some scissors and cut out the shape we just traced and take it over to the case and trace that shape on top of the lid. And now for the fun part, cutting out the shape. I landed on using this. It's an oscillating tool, and all it does is just jiggles back and forth extremely fast. And I'm hoping that this is going to make quick work of being able to just drop in and cut out the shape of the plastic on the lid. And it ended up working so much better than I could have expected, and it made such quick work at cutting out the shape. I was also surprised to see how thick the walls in the case actually were. This stuff's super heavy duty, way stronger and thicker than I imagined, and it makes me feel a lot better about putting the PS5 inside of here now. After going around and pulling off all of the burrs and doing a little bit of light sanding, we had a perfect spot where we could install our monitor. But we're also going to need a perfect spot where we can install our speakers, because yes, this is going to have its own speaker system as well. I ended up getting 2 of these marine grade speakers. They're supposed to be water resistant. They're 50 watt speakers, 4 ohms, and these should provide enough sound for us to be able to hear whatever we want when we're gaming. But in order to get the speakers to speak, we're going to need a little amplifier, and I got this. It's a small one, it's got left and right channels, and it runs off 12 volts. In order to control the volume, I ended up getting a little inline volume control. It's pretty cool. It's got a little knob in it that you can adjust the volume, and it's designed so you can install it in a hole, which is super convenient. But the connectors on the end, they're a bit bulky. They're these RCA type, and what I really want is I want to change them and swap them out so that there's some 3.5mm instead. And these are going to make things a whole lot easier when connecting up our sound system. Let's get those speakers in there. I mark a spot on the side of the case and take a 3-inch hole saw and begin to chop out a hole. Then I flip the case over on the opposite side, line up a hole just the same, and drill that out as well. Before we can install the speakers in the holes we drilled, they're still missing something. Much better. With our properly painted speakers, I can take one over to the hole we just drilled in our case, drop it in, then I take a marker using the speaker as a guide to mark the 4 corners, so I can take a drill and drill out each of the holes. Then I can drop the speaker back in place, thread in some small machine screws, and bolt it together through the case on the other side. With our speaker installed nice and secure, I flip over to the other side of the case, install that speaker just the same. With both of our speakers properly mounted and installed, there's still some more modifications that need to be made to the case. Like for one, the PS5 has a whole lot of connectivity that I don't want to lose. It has an HDMI port, it's got an Ethernet port, it's got a couple of USB ports, and on the other side, it's got the USB Type-C ports. It'd be a total shame if I let those ports go to waste, so I ended up getting a whole bunch of these. These are fantastic, I've used them in other projects. They're flush mounts with pass-throughs. This one's for HDMI, USB, and USB Type-C. I also got one for USB and 3.5mm audio, and the last one I got is for an Ethernet port. And these are going to be great for getting signals outside of the case. I want to install the flush mounts right here. So I grabbed myself some hole saws that match the diameter of each of the pieces so I can drill out the holes, slot them in place, and do that for each of them. Then on the inside of the case, I can take the plastic nuts that came with them, tighten them down around the threading to really fix them in place. With all of our ports installed on this side, it's time to flip the case over and install some other things on that side. Even though this has the ability to run off battery, I still want the option to be able to power this from a power supply, so I'm going to be installing this. This is a heavy duty 50 amp quick connect, and this is going to be where I connect up to an external power supply if I just want to use it like a regular console. After drilling the main hole, I take a marker to mark the 4 corners so I can drill them out with a small drill bit, then I can thread in some machine screws and bolt it down through the case. Looking good, but there's still one more thing I need to install under it. This, a small little DC barrel plug, and this is going to allow me to plug in a battery charger to charge up the internal battery. I grab a 1/2-inch drill bit and drill out a hole so I can slide in the barrel plug, and on the other side I tighten it down with the little metal included nut. And just like that, we have both of our power ports, one for charging the battery and the other for getting external power. The enclosure's looking better and better every step. but it's still missing something because the PS5, it's going to be putting off a whole lot of heat. So to keep it nice and cool, it's time to install some small little fans on the side so we can get some nice cross breeze going through the whole system. To keep everything nice and even, I grab myself a ruler so I can mark a couple places so I can take a nice hole saw and drill out a hole the exact size as the opening of each of the fans. Then using the included fan grill as a guide, I place it over each of the holes to mark the 4 corners. Then I drill out the marks. To keep things like debris and fingers from hitting the fan blades, I got some of these small little mesh fan filters. I installed the fans on the inside with some machine screws, then the filters, then the fans on top, and tightening it all down with a couple nuts. With the fans installed on this side, it's time to flip over the enclosure and install 2 more fans on the opposite side. And these are here to ensure that the PS5 stays nice and cool by bringing in cool air and venting out hot air. The next part to install in the case is going to be the power switch, and I got a pretty cool one. It's a super heavy duty switch. It's rated for 30 amps at 12 volts, which is honestly quite a bit. It's also a 3-position switch, so one side's going to be for battery power, the other side's going to be for external power, and the middle is going to be off. I also got a metal mounting plate for it, which is going to make it easier to install in the case. Using the faceplate as a guide, I place it where I want the switch to be and trace out the area with a marker. Then I can take the oscillating tool again, which honestly looks pretty funny on camera, and I use it to cut through the plastic. Then I drill out 4 holes for the corners so I can attach the faceplate with some machine screws. And now when we're ready to install the switch, we can easily just slot it into the faceplate and it's going to lock in place. Pretty cool. It's time to install the monitor. Since I want to be able to lug this thing wherever I want to have a little bit of protection for the monitor, so I ended up getting this. It's a piece of clear acrylic, and this is going to keep the monitor nice and safe. In order to install the acrylic, I go around with the ruler and mark some evenly spaced points all around the opening on the front. Then I drill them all out. To make sure everything's going to line up perfectly, I ended up making a little guide out of a piece of poster board and taking a pencil and tracing out all of the holes I just drilled. And this is going to allow a foolproof way for me to transfer the holes I drilled in the top to the piece of acrylic underneath so everything's going to line up beautifully. I was a bit nervous having to drill through the acrylic because I was worried it was just going to shatter, but it ended up being super easy and turned out really clean. Before I can install the piece of acrylic on the lid, I want to make a protective barrier using some of this alien tape. It's like a thick double-sided sticky tape, and I place it along the edges of the opening. Then I take a bunch of tiny machine screws and push them through the openings through the layer of alien tape into all of the holes. I can carefully unwrap the piece of acrylic, slide it into place over each of the screws, and taking a bunch of small little washers and nuts, I attach it down firmly to the opening on the case. Now I can grab the monitor and carefully lay it on top of the sheet of acrylic. In order to hold the monitor in place, I end up getting a thin bar of aluminum, but we are going to have to modify it a bit. I take some measurements of the distance between each screws on the sides and mark it on the bar. I cut out 2 identical lengths so I can line it up, mark where I need to drill some holes in the sides, then I can drill them out. But before I install the aluminum bars behind the monitor, I want to add a strip of the double-sided tape on each of the back sides. And this is going to act as a cushion and also a way to really hold the monitor in place so it's not going to be moving around. Then I can take some washers and nuts and tighten down the aluminum bars, and we have our monitor firmly installed. Nice. This is the point that I remembered I forgot to install the volume control. And it's super simple to install. I just grab the correct size hole saw, pop out the hole, slot in the control knob, and on the other side, I tighten it down with the plastic nut that was included. And now we have a super clean and easy way to change the volume from the outside of the case. This is starting to look so cool, but a cool case isn't going to be much without this. I mean, I could just open the thing up, throw the PS5 and battery inside and call it a day, but I want a strong base and foundation to attach all the components to, so I landed on this, a nice big yellow cutting board. This thing is thick, it's heavy duty, and it should be perfect for mounting all of our components. And it also fits inside the case super perfect and satisfying. Nice. Since I want this board to be firmly attached inside the case, I decided I was going to attach it with some machine screws, so I begin by marking out a whole bunch of evenly spaced points on the bottom of the case. Then I can go around and drill out all of the holes. And I gotta be honest, drilling through all of this yellow plastic kinda makes me feel like I'm drilling through a block of cheese. Whoops. With the holes drilled out, I need a way to transfer them perfectly to the cutting board, and I decided to use a simple method of just taking some of the double-sided tape and literally sticking the cutting board down to the base so that I can flip it over and drill through the holes I drilled out a second ago. And this is a super simple way to ensure that all the holes are going to line up when I go to install the cutting board later. Now when we open up the case, we can see we transferred over all the holes from the bottom onto the cutting board. Now I can pop it out and I can begin to install all of the major components on the cutting board, starting with the battery. I marked 4 spaces on the side of the battery so I could take a drill and drill them all out. And these holes are going to be for these large bolts that are going to help hold the battery in place. And using some more of that aluminum bar, I cut and drill out some lengths of it that slit perfectly over the bolts. And using some washers and wing nuts, we can use them to tighten down our battery to the cutting board, nice and secure. Before I attach the PlayStation to the board, since I'm planning on installing it in this small little container, I am a bit concerned about cooling this thing, so I think it's only fair if we give our PlayStation a little bit of a cooling hand. I ended up with a huge pile of fans, including these ones right here. They're pretty cool. They're little electric fans that have heat sinks on the back of them, and they also have a nice thermal adhesive, which will make it super simple to install. I also got a couple of these fans. They're blower fans, so they're more directional, and I think they're going to be really useful at pointing the air exactly where I want it. I also got a handful of aluminum heat sinks. They have nice long cooling fins on them, and they also have the thermal adhesive on the back, which is going to make them super easy to install. Let's get to cooling this thing down. The first thing I want to do is I actually want to take this main fan and flip it upside down. And lucky enough, the fan doesn't mind being installed upside down. It still fits this direction, and I just tighten it down with some small machine screws, and the wire can still reach the connector. Super nice. The whole point of flipping the fan upside down is so I can use it as a little table so I can mount the blower fans on top. To make it a little more stable, I take some of that leftover plastic from cutting open the hole in the monitor and cut out a piece of it that perfectly lines up with the fan. Then I can take some double-sided tape and place them on top of the fan. I also drilled in some small holes so I could attach it with some tiny machine screws as well. With the base plate nice and secure, I can take the blower fans, place on some double-sided tape, and stick them down so they're pointed directly at the heat sinks to keep them extra cool when they're inside the case. The whole point of the heat sinks are to take heat away from this main die area right here, because this is where most of the heat is produced. To help cool this area, I'm going to be installing these fans, and since they have the adhesive backing, they're super easy to install. I just place them directly on the heat pipes, and the adhesive is also super strong. Let's give some cooling to the back of this board. The first thing I notice is that this back heat pipe, it feels a little flimsy, so I'm going to just take some thermal adhesive, cut out a rectangle of it that matches the shape, and just stick it down to the base of the motherboard, just so this thing isn't flopping around when I'm carrying it. I take the other 2 heatsink fans I have, and I stick them down to the bottom of the motherboard, directly under where the main chip is. Then I take one of the passive heatsinks, and I stick it down in a good area as well. And I add one more of the passive heatsinks on this flat spot right here. Now this is one cool PS5. Let's get this thing on the board. Using a marker, I trace around every one of the metal feet. Then I can take a drill bit that's the same diameter as the feet and drill out all the holes so that when I take the PS5 and set it back on the board, I can squish down and push the standoffs into the holes. Then I can flip the board up, revealing the thread on the bottom of the standoffs, so I can take some thread locker, some small machine screws, and tighten them down to the bottom of the standoffs. And this is going to keep the PS5 locked in place so it won't fall off the cutting board. I ended up getting a whole bunch of these right angle adapters. They're just going to make the wire management and being able to plug things in a whole lot easier once we have the PS5 installed in the case. With the PS5 firmly attached, it's time to bring out all the other components. Like these, I ended up getting a set of bus bars, which is going to make it a whole lot easier to distribute power to all the components. There's also the sound amplifier, and to power the monitor, I ended up getting this. It's a USB-C power delivery port, and it runs right off of a 12-volt battery. And lastly, our DC to DC converter. I mark where the holes line up on the converter and the bus bars so I can drill out the holes. Then using some small screws, I tighten down the components directly into the cutting board. As for the amp and the USB-C port, it'll be easier to install those later. Before I can install the cutting board in the case, I have to add a little bit of cushion. So I got some thin foam with adhesive on the back, and I build up a layer of foam all over the holes in the bottom of the case. Then I take some of that clear double-sided tape and build up a couple layers of that. The reason for all this tape and foam, it's going to act as a bit of a shock absorber for the PS5. It's also going to act as a spacer for the bolts on the battery mount so they're not squished against the ground. It's finally time to bring it all together. I drop the PS5 board perfectly into the bottom of the case. Then using some machine screws, I drop one in each of the holes in the corner to make sure that the cutting board's perfectly lined up. I can then flip the case up and begin the process of threading in the machine screws and bolting it together through the back of the case and through the top of the cutting board. After installing so many of these machine screws, we can see that the cutting board and the case are now firmly attached together. Since I'm going to be installing the battery here, the little ends of the screws are in the way, so I have to make a little cushion out of some tape just to keep the battery off the screws. Now before it gets too crazy in here with all the wires, I ended up getting some of this tubing, and this is like a wire management tubing. It's going to keep all the wires in place, and I think it's going to look pretty nice. I take all of the wires coming out of the flush mount and wrap it in the white tubing so that I can take it and push it down where the battery is going to go and keep it out of the way. I also decided to build up a couple layers of the tape on this back wall just to act as a bit of a cushion on the battery. Now I can take the battery, slot it into place, but before installing the aluminum bars, just like the monitor, I add some of that double-sided tape on the back of it so that when I screw them down with the wing nuts, it's really just going to hold this thing super tight in place. Let's clean this up a bit. I grab all of the fan wires and thread it through the white tubing. Then using some of these self-adhesive cable clamps, I go around the white tubing and stick it down to the side of the case. And this is going to give me a super clean place where I can run all my wires, and it's going to look pretty awesome as well. Very nice. First up, it's time to take these fan wires and connect them together on some ring terminals so they'll easily fit on the bus bar. Next up, wiring all the power. I run some lengths of 10 gauge wire that are going to run from our battery to the switch, our external power port to the switch, and our switch to the bus bar. To make it easier when wiring up our switch, I attach these quick connects which easily fit over the pin connections. Then I can push the switch into the faceplate, and now we have a way to control our power. I then attach the input on the DC converter to the bus bars. Then I take the output covered in some of the tubing and run it through the back of the battery and attach it to the PS5 terminals. Now for wiring up the amplifier. To get power to it, I modified this little barrel plug to have some ring terminals on the end, which will just fit on the bus bars. Then for the speakers, I have to take the wires, feed them to the output on the amplifier, and tighten them all down. To install it in the case, since it is so lightweight, I went with the option of using some of the double-sided tape. I also plug in a 3.5mm cord and stick it down to the open space on the board. For installing the USB-C port for monitor power, I used some more of the double-sided tape and just stuck it down on top of the amplifier. I hook up the amplifier to the volume control on the wall, then I run the other end of the cable all the way up to the front of the case where we're going to install that later. Next up, let's hook up the barrel plug so we can charge our battery. So I extend the wires on it, crimp on some ring terminals on the end, then I run the wire all the way around through the tubing and connect it up with the main power to the terminals on the battery. Now I can take all of the wires that are running to our external ports on our case and plug them into the outputs on the PS5. For the audio and the HDMI, I have to do something a bit different. I grab an audio splitter so I can send one end to the port on the case, the other end to the volume control knob, and we're going to be getting the audio signal from the back of the monitor. For the HDMI, it's the same deal. I'm going to be splitting the output from the PS5. One of them is going to go to the port on the case, the other is going to go to the monitor. Since the HDMI splitter is a bit bulky, I put on some double-sided tape and just stick it to the back of the monitor. To get power, I plug in a right angle adapter so I can run a USB-C cord all the way around and plug it into our little power port. With all of the wiring done, it's time to do a little bit more cable management to clean up and attach all of the wires to the case. I'm honestly super happy with how the wiring management turned out. Time to close up the case, give it a little clean, flip the power switch, and let's test this thing out. All I gotta do, push this button and wait and see if it turns on. And after what felt like an eternity, the PlayStation logo finally showed up. So let's launch some Spider-Man and see how it runs. And yep, it's totally a PS5. The game was smooth, nothing was weird with it, and everything was working. I wanted to open up the case while the PS5 was running, just to feel how everything was doing, and it was a bit warm, so I decided to take the other passive heat sinks and put them on top of the main heat sinks just to help with some extra heat dissipation. Then it was back to playing some games, just to make sure nothing else weird would happen. But sadly, something did happen. So I ran the machine for around 30 or 40 minutes, and I ended up getting an overheating warning, and then when I opened it up, I noticed that it was super hot inside of it. Everything was just boiling feeling, and having that happen was honestly so disappointing. So I slept on it. And the next day, when coming back to it, there was something I noticed. The side fans, they weren't even spinning, and if I looked closer at it, it turns out I accidentally got 24 volt fans when I meant to get 12 volt fans. Oops. We were actually getting no fresh air in our system yesterday. Everything was just kind of sitting in there, getting stagnant and getting super hot. So it should be a pretty easy fix. I removed the old 24 volt fans and replaced them with some 12 volt fans. I also decided to swap out the fan filters with the original ones because they're going to have higher and better airflow. So after a quick little fan swap later, we had our correct voltage fans installed. I also ended up getting this ground loop isolator because I was getting a bit of static at super high volumes, so I plug it into the input on the amplifier, put on some double-sided tape, and stick it to the wall. No more static. I also decided to get a couple of these. These are DC speed controllers, and I want to hook them up to the fans because the new ones I installed on the side, they are a little bit loud, and this is going to allow me to adjust the speed of them and in turn adjust the volume of them. One switch is going to control the speed of the fans on the PlayStation, and the other is going to control the speed of the fans on the side of the case. Super cool. To install these in the case, I took some more of that leftover plastic and popped out a piece. I threw on some small labels so I know which switch does which. Then I stuck them on with some of the double-sided tape. I took some more of it on the backside and stuck it down on top of the battery. And now we have a way to tune our fans if we want extra cooling or want extra quiet. I've also been forgetting about the Wi-Fi antenna. It's just been flopping around in the corner, so I take a piece of tape and stick it down to the cutting board. It's time to close up the system and try for take 2. Time to load up a game, turn on a timer, and see what happens. And a solid 42 minutes later, we're still going strong. No overheating warning, and the system's performing beautifully. And when I open up the case today, everything is nice and cool. And having the adjustable fans is super useful. I can give it some more cooling power, or I can just make it whisper quiet. Pretty cool. After adding a few more things like giving it a proper label and adding on a matte screen protector to cut down some of the glare, the portable PS5 was complete. Let's check it out. On this side, we have our volume control in one of our speakers. Underneath that, we have our intake fans, which actually have a decent amount of suction and they can hold a card in place. And underneath that, we have all of our full connectivity. We have our Ethernet port for wired internet. We have an audio jack in case you want to plug in some headphones. There's a USB port if you want to charge something like a phone. There's also USB-C, which you can use to charge something else like the controller. There's also another USB port, and of course we have the HDMI port, so if you want, you can bring out another monitor or TV, plug it in, and it's going to mirror whatever's showing on the portable PS5. Nice. On the other side, we have our other speaker, our fan exhaust. Underneath those, there's the small barrel plug, so I can take a battery charger, plug it in, and it'll charge our internal battery right up. For the other port, we can take an external power supply, plug that in, flip the switch to external power, and we'll be able to run the whole system directly off of that. And I can still charge the internal battery at the same time. And something special about the battery I picked, it actually has a Bluetooth connectivity, so you can connect it up and view the stats, like how much percent it has left, how much power is going in and out, so we'll always know how much charge we have left. It's finally complete, the portable PS5. It's charged, working, and ready to go. Let's go have a little fun. Alright, let's have some fun. The game I want to play today is some Fallout 4. With the Fallout show coming out, it definitely made me want to replay the Fallout games, and I thought it'd be fun to just play it out here. And the reason I ended up getting this matte screen protector is because I did end up taking this thing out here to the same spot a couple days ago, and it's just super reflective, so I needed something to cut down on the reflection so the camera could see it and I could see it a little bit better. And I think this is definitely way better, especially in the sunlight. I've definitely been testing out this system by playing Fallout 4 just to make sure it doesn't overheat in anything, and if you can see, I've already started building my hometown base. And I ended up building in the sky because, I don't know, I thought it'd be cool. This is honestly a very beautiful spot. You got all these little bees just kind of flying around. But this whole park used to be like a missile base back in the day, but it was decommissioned and everything was filled in. So it's just a really unique park, and if you walk around, you can find old structures and stuff, including this gaming chair that we're using today. This chair has probably been here for I don't even know how long. There's so many parts that are just rusting through. So yeah, this rusty old chair is gonna be our little gaming chair for today, and I brought a towel just so I don't like cut myself, and maybe to add a little bit of cushion. Just playing some PS5 games in my little portable PS5. This thing's pretty cool. Uh-oh. Oh. I definitely gotta be careful about this chair. Every time I try to put my elbow here, gotta watch out so I don't get cut on this. This is pretty cool. A little bit of swimming. What is hitting me? I'm getting ratted up. Oh my gosh, I have to get out of here. There we go. Come on, Nick Valentine. Oh, goodness. Cargo, bye-bye. I also ended up bringing some couscous out here. I also have a little stove. And let's boil some water. Alright, you got a giant scorpion, the legendary one. He disappeared. What the heck? Oh. That hurts so bad. We having some crab tonight or whatever, and I only crippled myself. All right, look at that. Our water is going. I can turn it off. Oop, wrong way. You dump in the seasoning, and you dump in the couscous. Then you cover it, and we'll check on it in 5 minutes. This is honestly so nice to just relax here. Got some couscous cooking over there. The portable PS5 working beautifully out here. The thing's in pretty much direct sunlight, hasn't even overheated or anything like that. It is running strong, and this thing is super rugged. I feel like I could knock it off the table and it'll just bounce right back up and not even have a problem. It's a beautiful day just hanging out here in this field. Got little bees buzzing all around. About to have a nice little snack. Just playing some Fallout 4 on a portable PS5. I've probably been out here maybe an hour, hour and a half. I'm not really paying attention to the time too much. But right now I'm at 88% battery. So we went down like 10% since we've gotten here. So just kind of doing some rough calculations. I could probably play this Fallout game for maybe 8 to 10 hours on this thing if I went down about 10% in an hour. In the Spider-Man game, I could probably play that for like 4 or 5 hours on this battery. I think our couscous is ready. Look at this. This looks very good. Let's mix in some of those pine nuts, and we have ourselves a nice little snack. This is good. This is very good. What a beautiful day. There is something that I actually want to mention to you all, and that is I'm actually going to be going to a convention this year. It's called Open Sauce. I'm super excited about it, and it's a really cool place where all these different creators and inventors and just artists and smart people are going to be with all types of different booths of their inventions, their creations, and just cool things that they want to show off. And I'm super excited about it, to meet some new people and check out other cool things that people are making out there. So I'm going to put a link in the description if you want to check that out, and maybe if you go there, you might see me there. So it'll be a lot of fun. Anyways, I'm just gonna eat the rest of my couscous, play some more games, and enjoy my time hanging out in the forest. Cheers. Oh my goodness. What did I just do? This game can be super unforgiving sometimes. And I forgot to save for a while. Oh boy. They're running right at me. Oh! He ran at me with only a board. What a brave mutant. So I found these really cool like punching fists. I named them Hulk hands, and they're pretty crazy. Goodness gracious. In this game you can definitely get carried away by just picking up every little spoon you find. It makes it half the fun. This thing is running beautifully. It hasn't even triggered an overheating warning once. The air doesn't feel super hot that's coming out of the vent. I actually want to open this thing up and just kind of feel what it's going on in there, if it's really hot or anything. So let's see what it's like in here. Nothing is hot. In fact, I think it's actually colder in here than it is outside. That is wonderful news. That is awesome. Where'd he go? Gooified. Every once in a while, Vats does it. Oh my gosh! Who did that? Oh my goodness. Not much you can do about that. So I'm back at that spot. I'm taking a different approach. Oh, is that him? There, let's do a crit on him. Maybe that was the nuke guy. There's only one way to find out. Nope, that wasn't him. Oh my gosh. I have been going back and forth with this dude for too long. Okay, this is the nuke guy. Using the crit. Now we gotta go get that thing. Yeah, this is it. He had the fat man. And he has like power armor. Look what we have here. I mean, just for fun. Easily the coolest thing in the game. I think the most logical way to take care of these bears, like I was saying, the most logical way to take out these bears. Man, this bear is whooping my butt. Cram some cram in my mouth. There it is. Sorry, Yogi. This ain't your park anymore. I really like my little base camp. I put it way above the wasteland, with like pretty much as high as it would let me build it, and as far out as I could build it. And I just really wanted to build like a spiral staircase going down to the ground. The portable PS5 is running beautifully. I've been running it for right around 3 hours straight, just kind of hanging out in the direct sunlight. Not a problem at all. And if we look at the battery, it's a little bit hard to see. I'm at 76% battery right now. That's really not bad at all. I think today was a perfect test for the portable PS5, and it passed. Resounding success. I'm so happy and thrilled about how this thing turned out. This is something that I've always had on my mind for quite a while, but I've kind of been scared of making it, mostly because I had to buy a PS5 and just take it apart, and I was worried I was going to break it, but it ended up being pretty straightforward, and it ended up working beautifully, and I'm super impressed and happy with how this came out. Anyways, it's time for me to head on back, get on out of here before it turns dark. But yeah, I don't want to be wandering around the forest using a portable PS5 as a flashlight. But I am thinking about doing a video in the future of just doing some tent camping again, bringing this thing out and trying to play and beat a game in the forest, and that might be a lot of fun. Let me know if you'd like to see something like that in the future. Anyways, I just want to say thanks for stopping by, everybody. I truly hope you enjoyed this video of the process of making the portable PS5, because man, it was a whole lot of work to get all the pieces, make sure everything worked, but I'm super happy with how it came out, and I hope you really enjoyed the video as well. Thanks for stopping by, everybody, and I'll catch you on the next one.